Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar.
Hello. Welcome to our second webinar about how different cultures are reacting to COVID-19. So I'm Jussara Pereira de Souza, and this is Fernando, and we are both Brazilian and Dutch, living in the Netherlands. I'm a psychologist and pedagogue, and I have been developing my career in leadership, culture, and as an assessor, a coach, and a facilitator. Most recently, I have been also working in photography as a parallel career, and now working to combine both. Can you say more about yourself?
Well, my name is Fernando Lanzer. I was a senior executive in human resources in international banks. And about 17 years ago, I left to join Jussara in consulting in leadership and organizational culture. This is our program for today. We're going to look at 7 types of culture, 7 different strategies against COVID-19, and with a focus on India, the UK, France, Austria, Sweden, Portugal, and Japan.
So to start with, we would like to just address something that is really important, which is no culture is better than the other one. Yeah, than another one. They are just really different. And there are lots of differences, as we know, in diversity in different countries and among countries. At the same time, some possibility of some shared values. And our focus will be mostly in the shared values that some cultures have. Also, culture doesn't explain everything. I mean, there's geography, there's history, there's economy. Those aspects influence culture and are influenced by culture, but the culture itself doesn't explain everything. And also pay attention to individuals, because individuals are unique. So they are influenced by their culture, but they are unique.
We work with a model that was created by Hofstede, based on the Hofstede studies on culture. So Haub took the research that was carried out by Hofstede throughout the world, and Haub realized that certain cultures have certain shared values, and he classified these cultures in 6 categories, plus 1, which is Japan, and we'll see that at the end. But the first of the 6 categories is the contest culture. And what are contest cultures? Those are the ones in which the basic assumption is that life is a competition, it's a contest, and there are always 2 opposing ideas that clash against each other. And out of that clash, something positive comes out. And the kinds of culture that are contest cultures are basically the Anglo-Saxon cultures. So the UK, the US,
Australia,
Canada,
New
Zealand, those are all contest cultures. The second type of culture are what we call the well-oiled machine cultures. And in these cultures, the basic assumption is that life is a bit chaotic and it needs order. So it's up to society to organize life in a way that if everybody performs according to plans and structures, society will work like a well-oiled machine. As long as everybody does their role as they're supposed to, then life will be easy and everything will work like a well-oiled machine. And this is typical of the Germanic cultures. So Germany itself, but also Austria, Switzerland, the Czech Republic, these are all well-oiled machine cultures. The third type of culture are called network cultures. And in network cultures, the basic assumption is that there are individuals throughout society that are all pulling in different directions according to their own personal interests. but they need to find a way to work and live together. So they need to negotiate a way of working, but the basic assumption is that they are all equal. They have the same value. And these cultures are basically the Dutch and the Scandinavian cultures. So Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway.
Nice.
These are all network cultures. Now, all three of these are egalitarian cultures. They do not appreciate hierarchy very much.
And the opposite for the other three ones, because they are all hierarchical, basically hierarchical cultures. So the first type, hierarchical, is the social pyramid. So in this one, then hierarchy is hard and clear and structured. And at the same time, there's importance gave to relationships and groups. So many things happen in these countries through relationships. And groups develop their relations with groups as well in a way that the groups help individuals and protect them. And individuals in return give all the loyalty to the groups that they belong to. Those are typical. Most of the world are pyramids, so most of Latin American countries, most of African countries, and Middle Eastern countries. And in Europe, we have Portugal and Greece on this pyramid style. The other one is the solar system. In the solar system, it's hierarchy as well, but in a way, a big difference is that there's more emphasis in individual opinions. So the individuals are more important in those cultures than groups. They are important, but the individual opinion is really important. So there is this kind of tension and conflict when, for instance, the boss is around, so people will respect the hierarchy, will respect the boss, but if the boss is not around, so tendency is that individuals will follow their own agenda. Yeah? This is typical for France, Belgium, Spain, and a part of Italy. The other type of culture that Howe identified, he called family. The family, then, it's also hierarchical. It's very similar to the social pyramid in that sense, because it's also we focus in groups and in relationships, but also the most important group is the family group. And the big difference from the social pyramid, it's the long-term vision. So in those cultures, different from the social pyramid, those countries have a very long-term orientation, and they are very much flexible in terms of changing and adapting easily, thinking in what they can achieve in the long term. Mm-hmm. So those are basically the Asian countries like China, Indonesia, Taiwan, and other countries from Asia. So, starting with India, the family cluster.
India is a family cluster, and it is strong on relationships. It emphasizes relationships a lot. There is acceptance of hierarchy. The castes are an example of the acceptance of hierarchy in society. The assumption is that the leader decides, but the leader also cares for the population and for the company in terms of a organizational leader. And the leader also has the power to punish.
Yeah, so how this impact in the COVID-19? For instance, when the first cases came to India, the decision was for a lockdown, a very severe lockdown, and immediate. And then Modi, the prime minister, addressed the communities in a way that is very much in connection with the hierarchical type of leader, the father, the benevolent father. That's the way he addressed. So he was talking and asking people to take care of their families. And in the name of taking care of their families, they should stay at home. It would be, he said, a mistake going out, a mistake that you will have against your family. He also asked people to use their networks, to use the family and the friends and the relationship, and divulge the same information to more people, saying that they have to stay at home and they also have to use masks. So the address was that the masks will be compulsory to be used. Yeah.
The Indian culture is also a relativistic culture. And what that means is there is no absolute truth. There are many truths. Everything is relative. It depends on the situation. Rules must be applied depending on the situation. There's a lot of superstition and religion as well in the Indian culture. There are many different religions coexisting and many superstitions. And there's a lot of flexibility, and the flexibility helps people to adapt and to innovate in every aspect of their lives.
Yeah, those aspects, how they appear in the COVID situation. The groups, again, talking about the relationships, the groups help in one side and didn't help in another one. The contagious was bigger because, especially the religion aspect, the religion groups who are big in India, of course, they came together for rituals, religious rituals. And then you see, for instance, 4,000 people coming together in New Delhi and 1,000 people coming out with contamination, infected. So this example happened in more situations all over the country. On the other hand, those groups, especially the religious ones, they came together to help others, to prepare food, to distribute food. And this is also in connection with something that it's important in the Indian culture, which is the karma. So the idea that you can, what you do today to somebody, you might need that somebody do for you in the future or in another life. So people also put attention in helping others, yeah? And the superstition and the religion also came in the idea of a miracle cure. So domestic herbs or remedies, or even the urine from the sacred cows, maybe could, the idea that maybe could help to cure, yeah,
the coronavirus.
The coronavirus, yeah. And then the flexibility from the Indian people, and the innovation came alive, especially with the app that they developed. This app, in maybe a week or 3 days or so, there was already 5 million people using, and then in 1 month, more than 100 million people. And this app is basically to track the coronavirus and to give information. Yeah, and most recently, I think in the end of July, they also developed a kit for testing, a very fast one that in 1 hour can give you an answer, and it seems to be as accurate as the one that has been using all over the world. Yeah, so those are the innovation aspects.
Let's go to England.
To England. So England, if you remember, then it's a competition country, culture. Then there is a low hierarchy, so people really search for autonomy and freedom to do things in their own way. And there's a lot of confrontation. So people compete a lot. And the idea is that from those competition, those confrontations, something good will come out. Yeah. So then, like in US, where we see more, the winner and the loser are always also coming out of this competition. And there's the idea that everybody should know the rules. The rules of the competition should be very clear. And then performance, it's important, results, and standing out in your performance. The results are more focused in the short-term results, and there's a bias for action. So the idea is just go out and do something. That was the addressing from the Prime Minister in UK was go out and we will beat this virus. That was the idea.
We're going to beat the virus. A very different attitude compared to Modi in India. Modi was the father. And Boris Johnson was picking a fight with the virus.
Exactly.
Anyway, in terms of the virus, there was initially a lot of self-confidence and pragmatism in the UK. So people thought, well, it's inevitable that the virus will come. So let's just let everyone catch the virus. And after a while, we will have the so-called herd immunity. So a lot of people will catch the virus, will become immune, and then the virus will stop spreading once most of the population have already got it. But then came the Imperial College projections, and they basically said, look, if you do nothing, there will be up to 500,000 people dead because of the virus in the UK. And of course, that was unacceptable. So they decided to have a different strategy and decided to have a lockdown. But at the same time, they realized that because the British do not accept hierarchy, they cannot accept anything imposed from government. So government started with recommending people to stay home, recommending them to wear masks, recommending them to keep social distance. But of course, there was a lot of disobedience because basically the Brits also do not like to be told what to do because autonomy is very much valued. And because of that, there was a lot of discussion again. It quickly became polarized. Should we do this? Should we not do this? Does the government have the right to impose something on us on this kind of situation? No, the government should never impose anything. And while this discussion was going on, the virus continued to spread. So sadly, the UK has one of the worst indicators in terms of deaths per million in Europe. And the public ended up losing faith in government because there was a lot of confusion going on. On top of all this, the British culture encourages that people have a bigger risk appetite. So basically the assumption was, I'm in charge of my own life and I'm willing to take the risk. I decide what I need to do. So if I want to go out, that's my responsibility. I will go out and I will risk getting the virus if I'm comfortable with it. Now that attitude, of course, was not helpful because it ended up causing a lot of contamination because a lot of people refused to stay at home and to keep social distance.
And also the social distancing in the bars or so, or outside, which was at the beginning 1.5 meters. Now it's until 1.5. So people can do even less if they want.
Yeah. They're trying to, again, not impose
rules,
but
flexibilization in the also on this.
But that doesn't really help. France.
So a solar system type of culture following help. Then the tension between the hierarchy and the individual freedom, as I said before. And then there's the autocracy, the hierarchy and the tendency of the difference, for instance, for a pyramid and a family is that people follow the hierarchy, people follow the orders and tend to obey, and here not. So here there's the tendency to follow people's own agenda. So that's the disobedience. It's often. There's also uncertainty avoidance, so people will do all kinds of mechanisms to avoid uncertainty, to feel safe. Yeah? Bureaucracy, it's one of them, and it's very strong in Italy and in France, no doubt. Yeah? And in France also another specific characteristic is the theory, the intellectualization. So tendency is to start with the theory and then after having a good discussion in ideas, then go to the practice, which is the opposite, for instance, for UK or the Anglo-Saxon cultures where practice comes first and then from there go to the theory. But here, being an intellectual is very much appreciated and valued in France.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
because of that, for instance, starting from the bottom, there was a lot of discussion initially in France simply about the concept of, does the government have the right to impose any kind of measure or not? So there was a lot of intellectual discussion about what is the role of government, what is the role of the central government and of the provinces and of the local municipalities. A lot of discussions about how far can each of these different instances go on a theoretical level before actually deciding to implement any kind of action.
Yeah, and how much are we going to follow or not?
Yeah,
because also the
how
decision
much,
on
what
that.
is the responsibility in theory of the individual citizen?
Yeah.
So this resulted, of course, in a lot of conflict between the local governments and the central government. Although there was, after a while, some national decrees were issued, a lot of the municipalities decided that in their case, this did not apply. So they decided, no, this is no good for us. They're deciding this in Paris and it's good for Paris, but down here in the Provence, it's a different reality. We will do what we think should be done. And you had then a lot of different measures being taken by each city or each province. In the meantime, the virus started spreading. There was a compulsory lockdown because there is the respect for hierarchy
and centralization
of the decisions. Yeah. So eventually, the central government did decide and did impose measures, but in practice, many of those measures were not followed, were not obeyed. Yeah. An aspect of the French culture is that because of uncertainty avoidance, they like very detailed instructions, and this was reflected indeed in the government measures, because you could see everywhere the instructions about how to behave were very detailed. And if you go into a website from the government to get instructions about the coronavirus, they will basically tell you in very much detail what to do if you are going into a restaurant, if you are going into a shop, if you're going into a bakery, if you are an individual who needs to travel, if you want to visit a museum. Everything is very specific and detailed. And another aspect of this uncertainty avoidance and also linked to the bureaucracy, the decision was that people could go out if they had a good justification for going out, but then they needed to have a pass or some kind of documentation that justified their not staying inside, not staying at home. And for instance, if you were caught more than 100 kilometers from your address, you had to justify this to the police. And another characteristic of the culture, again, is there is a lot of fiscalization of that. So police,
Control,
a lot of control. So indeed, police stopped people on the streets and asked them for their papers and asked them for justification for why were they not at home, and do you have something to testify? Do you have evidence of your address? And if you're more than 100 kilometers, how come you're more than 100 kilometers from your address, and etc. And we have friends in France who indeed were witnesses to that.
Yeah.
They were stopped several times on the streets, sometimes 2 or 3 times on the same day.
And this is unthinkable, for instance, in the Netherlands.
Yeah, in other cultures, this would be totally unacceptable. But in the French culture, it made sense. It is consistent with the culture. Then we go to Austria.
To Austria. So can you say something
Austria,
about?
Yeah, Austria is a well-oiled machine culture. So it is all about order, structure, and discipline. The idea is that if there is a clear structure, if there are plans, and if everybody follows those plans and behaves according to that structure, then things will work. It's not about hierarchy. It is about respecting the experts. The experts are designing the plans and the structures, and everybody should respect their expertise. So these plans are made by people who really know about the topic. And as long as everybody follows the experts, then life will be easy and things will work like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah. Well, the COVID there in Austria started in a ski resort. So the first cases came from there, and there was lots of discussion about, because the first idea for the people who were running the places were about the economy and saying that, well, this is a high time, high season, and we cannot just close the ski resorts because there's no evidence. So that comes the expertise. There's no clear evidence that this came from here.
Yeah, so they challenged they challenged the hierarchy.
The government, or the one who has the power, and said we will not close before having evidence. Then in this sense, it takes maybe a week or more for the experts to evaluate the situation, analyze the situation, and come to the conclusion that yes, it actually came from there, and it was really a hotspot that is spread all over Europe, because people were there from the different countries, mainly from Europe.
Yeah, but in those early days, it took a week just to get the results of the tests.
Exactly. Then the city was closed, the whole city, the first halt stop. And then, of course, after having the evidence, there's more concerning about identified hotspots and close them. So that was the main action. And in connection with the idea of the structure, order, and so, all the instructions were very much detailed, like also in France. There was the same idea, and the execution was orderly. So people then really, okay, this is what we have to do, this is what the experts are advising, then we will go for that. That's similar in Germany.
Yeah, but that's the big difference with France, because in France, when people they were told what to do, and people did not obey. In Austria, there was an initial discussion. But then once the expert said, this is what you have to do.
Exactly.
Everybody
This
obeyed.
is our advice. This is what will really help. Then people really obey. And what was also helpful, it's because of the good structure of the country, the good planning, and so the hospitals, they cover 99% of the health system. It's covered Austria, and it's gratis. It's
Free.
Free. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
free also. So people have a good health system to support them. Yeah. And they had very good results, and they have been till now. No clear idea of a second wave until now, and they were then the first to close and the first to open. Also, the government was in a certain moment doing some advertisement for people to come on vacation to Austria, because here we are with a good environment and safe environment.
Yeah, we are corona free.
Corona, yeah, or bijna, almost corona free. Yeah, okay. So Sweden is then a network style of culture. Then equality again, so it's a low hierarchical country. Then together with the equality, there's this need of autonomy and freedom to do what people really believe and to express their individual opinions and ideas. And together with this, there's lots of discussion. And like Fernando said before, there is need for discussion. To everybody who should be involved in a situation, should be listened, should participate, should bring the ideas. And then from all these ideas, we have to discuss and we have to get some consensus that people can, all this involved, can live with. Yeah. Another important part of the society is the focus in quality of life. So work, it's important, yes, but we don't live just to work. Yeah? It's work to live. So our quality of life, it's coming in the first place. Yeah? So tasks, okay, we are focused also in tests. Oh, text, oh my. Tasks.
Yeah.
And but quality comes first. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Sweden made the headlines because they did not impose a lockdown. So the idea was sold to other people in the world that Sweden was doing nothing, which is not true. What happened was that the government, because of the equality, the government knew that they could not impose anything. So they decided to go for the herd immunity strategy, let people in general get the virus until most of the population has had it and developed immunity. But to avoid that the curve of infections would be too high, too steep, and that it might overwhelm the health system, something that happened in Italy and in Spain. So to avoid that, they made recommendations. So they did not decree a lockdown, but they basically said, you should stay at home and only go out if it's really necessary. Restaurants may continue to be open, but you should maintain social distancing, 1.5 meters of distance. Yeah? People should wear masks, but all of this were recommendations. No imposition. The problem is that in practice, there was also a lot of disobedience. For instance, the restaurants were never closed, but they were required to have the tables 1.5 meters away from each other. There was an audit at some point in time, and this found that 1/3 of the restaurants, at least, were not obeying those recommendations. Yeah? But the biggest problem that Sweden had was in the homes for the elderly, these institutions for the elderly. The recommendation, again, was that they should be isolated, but this was poorly done in practice. Yeah? So people continued to visit some of these elderly, although the recommendation was that they should not get any visitors. The nurses were contaminated and continued to care for the elderly, even though they were having symptoms. And people did not realize that in practice, this basically spread the virus within the elderly guests at these homes. So there was a great many deaths that happened in these elderly homes. And this Swedish government recognized that this was the big mistake that they made, that they did not enforce isolation of the elderly. When this was found out, when they realized that the deaths were increasing very much among the elderly, they then acted to enforce the lockdown in the elderly homes in a more strict fashion, but it was already too late. The virus had already spread. There was also a problem with lack of equipment, proper equipment for the nurses. So they didn't have the proper equipment to avoid getting contaminated. And that caused them to become sick and then to transmit the virus again. So all of this was solved halfway, so that now Sweden is doing all right again and the wave has passed. But it had much more deaths than expected because initially they didn't take good enough care of the situation in the elderly homes. Yeah? And of course, there was some delayed reaction because of the need for consensus. So when situations started to get out of hand and people started discussing, but it took them a while to decide, okay, then we need to have an imposed lockdown at the elderly homes. And some people say, well, you cannot do that. We cannot impose, yeah, but we have to. So this also contributed to spreading the virus. In practice, the Swedish government closed schools, but only for children 16 years old and above. So they kept the schools open throughout the pandemic for the children below 16. And the reasoning behind this was that, well, if we close the schools and the children have to stay home, they need to be taken care of by their parents. And their parents, in many instances, are nurses and doctors. They will not be able to work if they have to stay home to take care of the children. So that's why we cannot have the children at home. We need them to be at the school so that the nurses and doctors can be at the hospitals and at the care homes for attending to the patients. So that was the reasoning behind it. And the only thing that was really imposed from the beginning is that meetings over 50 people were prohibited, but otherwise just recommendations. Then we go to Portugal. Portugal is a bit of a success case in Europe. Despite being a social pyramid culture, it had results overall that were very similar to those of Austria and Germany, which are well-oiled machine cultures. And the big driver for that was uncertainty avoidance.
Yeah, the uncertainty avoidance is the need to be safe and the need to avoid anything that can bring uncertainty to life. So when the virus came to Portugal, it's scared. The government, the people, communities, they were scared at the beginning, and then early it was decreed in a state of emergency. Yeah, and the government also start trying to expand the ICUs. Yeah, the intensive care units to have more capability to attend with the health system. So at the end, 35% of the health system was increased. Yeah, and the government closed the borders, closed the schools, isolated the elderly, and did everything that was considered important to avoid the virus. because of the hierarchy and the, let's say, the hierarchy in the country, there was obedience. And people were having this civic sense and self-discipline. So, okay, this is what is necessary to help the country. This is what is necessary to eliminate this problem. Then we will do what is necessary. So this civic sense came really very much alive and help very much in the situation in Portugal, making a good result till now.
But they also had a good example from the top.
Yeah, they also have a good example, which is the Prime Minister, for instance, here served not as not giving a hard decision to everybody should obey, but he was giving an example, going, for example, to a beach and with a mask and staying a very short time, taking the mask only to go to the water and coming back and putting his mask and keeping distance and talking to the cameras, to the TV and saying, well, you have to do it that way. You have to also keep your distance. So giving a good example. So that was really reinforcing for the Portuguese people.
This was a big difference from Brazil. Brazil is also social pyramid culture, very similar to Portugal.
Yeah.
But in Brazil, the leader, Bolsonaro, as many people already know, denied that the virus was serious.
Exist?
yeah, or that it was just a hoax.
Yeah.
He didn't wear masks in public, and he was basically giving a bad example. And that created a lot of controversy in Brazil.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is Portugal had great results, a great performance in terms of reacting to the virus, while Brazil has one of the worst situations in the world because people did not have the same civic sense, and there was not a positive example coming from the top.
Yeah. Well, two other aspects from the culture are the formalism. So people, in comparison with Brazil, for instance, it's more formal. Yeah. But this is also in connection with the civic sense being strong. And the magic thinking, which is also very much in Brazil, but in Portugal, it's in connection mostly with the religious. And then with the Catholicism, basically. And then what happened is people are praying for a good result, praying for the virus to be, the problem to be solved. And they, for the need of the religion services, so they continue having, but these were all via TV or web, because then again, people were following the idea that they should not come together even for the religious services, although they would like to, and but really avoiding that and doing the way that it's possible. Again, following this civic sense.
Yeah, so they went to church, but via the computer, not physically in church, but using the computers and the TVs. And then we come to Japan. Japan is a culture that does not fit in any of the other 6 categories. It is unique. It has a unique combination of value dimensions. And it had excellent results as well in terms of
one of the best
virus.
Results.
Yeah,
yes,
in comparison with
comparison with the population, the number of deaths, it's really low. Yeah, so Japan, it's very much uncertainty avoidance country. So there's the need of being avoiding everything that is unsafe. Yeah, and this methodic, it's full of rituals. All this, it's really for people to have this feeling of being safe, of having something that is traditional, that it coming to the country for many years. Yeah, so this helps very much with the virus in the aspect of the hygiene, because there's everything, it's very much clean all the time. If you enter in a train, the speed train in Japan, you will get right away something to clean your hands. People have also no problem to using masks. This is not new. This is also from the SARS and from other moments. And if people have any health problem that can contaminate others, they will use masks. This is already a habit. Huh? And the bowing also help, because there's no contact with the hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in some cultures, you hug people and you kiss people on the cheeks.
Yeah, then it's more difficult for people to refrain for that.
Yeah.
But for the Japanese, this is in their culture, so there's no
they maintain
problem.
Social distance as part of normal life.
And also in the trains, it's not easy for people to start conversation with somebody who is not known. Different from Brazil, for instance, that people can tell you all their lives in while waiting to pay something in a bank. Yeah. So that's the difference. Yeah. So I'd like to say something.
The Japanese culture also focuses on results and excellence. Yeah. So there is a lot of discipline for seeking excellence, and relationships are also important. Trust is important, achieving trust. And they have a unique bottom-up consensus decision-making process. So basically, the decision-making process in companies and in government as well is that you start discussing at the bottom of the social hierarchy, and there's a certain consensus that is taken as a proposal to the next level. And then the discussion is started again at this other level. And then there's another consensus, which may coincide or not with the one from the bottom, but then it's taken to the next level and so on. So eventually, when it finally reaches the top, the CEO or the prime minister will make the final decision, but he already has an idea of what the consensus is. And in 99% of the situations, he follows the consensus, although the final decision is still his, and he may decide something different. Yeah. Now, what this impacted on the COVID situation is that Japan decreed a lockdown initially and isolated, but there was a discussion whether there should be, for instance, a lockdown in the whole country, restricting internal travel. And it took them a while. It took them a while, for instance, to cancel the Olympics, which were scheduled for Japan. Yeah? And the reason why it took them a while is because this process was going on. It was taking them a while to reach that decision. The culture is also one of many truths of relativism. So it basically means you need to apply the rules according to each situation and having the long-term perspective. What is the best for the long term? You should seek harmony and balance, but always keeping in mind what is the best for the long term and being flexible in the middle until you reach the long term.
Yeah, this impact already in what has been done now, thinking about the future, because now Japan, it's already training health people and training everybody who should be involved in the future with situations similar to COVID, not only for what is going on now, but what can come in the future, especially in connection with the health situations in the country.
Okay. So
questions now.
Time for questions now. We do the questions then.
Yeah. So maybe it's already one question from Adri. So if we think that there's a correlation between culture and a number of COVID casualties, yes. Not only culture. Again, can I explain that? but certainly it's part of the equation. Yeah, I think Japan, it's a good example of how, for instance, this culture that avoid uncertainty, that is very much focusing in discipline as well, in being formal, in not having easy contacts, like the most of the Latin cultures. So this also helps for them to have a good result. But uncertainty avoidance alone, it doesn't answer. Yeah, it helps in this case. It helps in Austria, in Germany, and but it didn't help in Belgium, for instance, because then you put together in the equation the individualism, the need to do things in my own way. So in that sense, people are doing things in their own way, and that's not helpful.
Yeah, there's when you look at the data, you see that initially the countries with the best indicators were well-oiled machine cultures. Austria and Germany were the two countries that had the best initial response to the virus. And the ones that had the worst responses were all solar system cultures, Belgium, France, Italy, and Spain. But it's not only about the culture, and culture is a bit more complex than that. So Britain, that had initially very good results, later overtook the other countries and became worse off in terms of deaths per million. And now it is only behind Belgium in the worst indicators. And again, what has spurred the problem in England, I guess, is the idea of autonomy, of rejecting any kind of imposition. So the love of freedom actually
sometimes it's not helpful.
Yeah. You have to pay a toll for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people want to be free, they want to be autonomous, but in terms of facing the virus, that is a problem. We've been in contact with people in China as well, for instance, which is on the opposite extreme. The lockdown in China was more severe than anything by far anywhere else in the world. And they still have some of the best indicators, certainly in regarding the population, because China has a huge population, and they could be much worse off in terms of the corona. But they only managed to avoid that because it's a very hierarchical culture. It would be impossible to have such a strict lockdown anywhere else in the world except China, probably. So there is, I think, a correlation again between the number of deaths and the uncertainty avoidance. The higher the uncertainty avoidance, the lower the number of deaths. But it's not only one dimension, because when there is a hierarchy and there's a conflict with individualism, which is the case of the solar system, that doesn't help. So the solar system countries did not do well and because although they are hierarchical, they're also very individualistic, and that conflict didn't help them.
In the case, for instance, of Brazil, it's also a country that tried to avoid uncertainty and to be on the safe side, and the religion helps that, and also rules and legislation and so and so. And it's a hierarchical country, so the government could, in a sense, have a measure that use the culture characteristics and decree a lockdown in a way that people really could follow. But the examples in that sense were not the best ones. So there was no, from a central government, there was no belief that the disease were serious. There was not belief that the mask can help. So this didn't help the country, because then we didn't have our leader giving us some direction. So in that sense, Brazil, it's also in a very bad condition.
The role of leadership was indeed important, because after Boris Johnson himself became ill, his attitude also changed. And the UK today is doing much better, so the wave is going down. Although the number of cases, the wave of deaths is going down, but the number of cases is going up again in a kind of a second wave, because despite the fact that the Prime Minister is now advocating a number of measures to avoid social contact, etc., still people are disobeying that. Yeah? There are still different factors going into the equation, but the behavior of the leaders is also one of them. The countries that have the biggest number of deaths now are Brazil and the US, and they basically have leaders that deny the importance of the virus, that deny the seriousness of the virus. So that behavior from the leader also influenced the results overall very much.
Yeah, we have to move on because we are at the end of our time. So Gigi is asking, have you looked into the differences of how countries count or register deaths due to COVID-19? Yes, and there are differences, of course, Gigi, but at the end you have to deal with the information that is available all over the world. Yeah? So I don't know if you want to say that. Yeah, sometimes it's not stressful. Or some countries don't register this or that. But anyway, it's what is available.
Yeah, and there are slightly different criteria, but what I've seen, because I've done some research on that, the difference is not that high depending on the criteria. Yeah, some people would say, some countries are saying, if a person dies of any cause but is tested positively, then it is tallied as cause of death coronavirus. Other countries are saying, no, the death is only considered coronavirus caused if on the death certificate that is specifically mentioned. So that might account for some differences, but the big numbers don't change. I mean, if you change the criteria, you will not get a huge difference in the big numbers. Yeah? The US and Brazil still have the largest number of infections and still have the largest number of deaths. Japan still has the lower number of deaths. If you change that criteria, you won't get that much a difference overall.
Yeah, but I think it's important to consider always the number of people that die in the relation to the number of the population. So this is, makes a lot of difference in see how the countries are doing. And just to finish then, Reynold is saying freedom, the takeaway is freedom comes with its price. Yeah, no doubt, because democracy produced Trump and produced Bolsonaro in Brazil. So yeah, it comes with a price. Yeah. Would you like to say something else?
We will have be having other webinars in the future. So we will also have some webinars on other topics, not only about culture, things like the competencies of successful entrepreneurs, changing workplace culture. So we will be announcing these in the coming weeks, and we hope that we can see you again.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Somebody say, today Russia announced a vaccine. Yes. Yes, there are 6 vaccines, and in those 6, Russia was not counted. And also the Indian vaccine was not counted. Indian has 2 actually.
Yeah.
In test.
It's interesting because Putin announced a vaccine today, and Modi announced that he will announce a vaccine on the weekend. But the media is more dominated by the Anglo-Saxon cultures. So we hear much more about the vaccines that are developed in Europe and the Western countries. Yeah. And we don't hear that much about the vaccines in Russia and in India, although they will probably be ready first. We'll see how effective they are. Yeah, but maybe we should indeed take them more seriously. Thanks again for being with us. Yeah, and see you next time.
See you next time, maybe. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care.